In the waning light of a late autumn afternoon, Emma pressed on through the uneven terrain, her worn boots sinking into the soft earth with each heavy step. The sun hung low behind the distant hills, casting long shadows that stretched across the rugged countryside like fingers reaching out to pull her back. But Emma's gaze remained fixed ahead, eyes narrowed against the biting wind that tugged at the tattered shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The journey had been long, far longer than she had ever anticipated when she first fled the suffocating confines of her small town. Yet, despite the ache in her legs and the gnawing hunger in her stomach, she clung to a fragile hope. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a new life awaited. Behind her, the faint outline of the village grew smaller with every mile, swallowed by rolling fields and dense groves of oak and pine. The memories she carried were heavy, whispers of hardship that had driven her to this desperate flight. The town's dusty streets, once familiar, had become prisons of whispered judgments and closed doors. Emma had no family left to turn to, no friends who could offer shelter. The only thing she possessed was a raw determination, a fierce will to survive. As the path wound upward, flanked by wild brambles and twisted roots, Emma's thoughts drifted to the stories she'd heard in passing. The tales of the rancher who lived just beyond the ridge. A solitary man, some said, rugged and unyielding as the land itself. But others spoke of a kindness beneath the rough exterior, a heart quietly yearning for connection. It was that slender thread of hope that led Emma onward, step by aching step. Eventually, the trees thinned, and before her stretched the vast expanse of the ranch. Weathered wooden fences marked the boundaries of sprawling pastures where cattle grazed under the watchful eye of a few distant herders. The main house, a sturdy structure of stone and timber, stood stoic against the encroaching dusk. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, a signal of warmth and life. Emma hesitated for a moment, taking in the scene with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Her throat tightened, the weight of her journey settling heavily upon her. With a deep breath, she pushed forward, each step now fueled by a mixture of desperation and hope. The gravel crunching beneath her feet announced her approach as she neared the house. The front door, framed by a simple porch, was shut tight against the chill. She paused, lifting a trembling hand to knock, then faltered. What if no help awaited her here? What if she was turned away, left to wander the cold night alone? Summoning every ounce of courage, Emma rapped firmly upon the door. The sound echoed sharply, followed by a brief silence that stretched taut with anticipation. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man whose face was weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, a piercing shade of gray, regarded her with a guarded intensity. "Can I help you?" His voice was low and steady, carrying the weight of authority tempered by a hint of curiosity. Emma swallowed hard, the words lodged in her throat but refusing to be silenced. "Please, I need work. I have nowhere else to go." Her voice was soft but resolute, carrying the raw edges of exhaustion and desperation. The rancher's gaze flickered downward, taking in her dust-streaked clothing and the dirt smudged across her cheeks. For a moment, he said nothing, as if weighing her presence, measuring the truth in her eyes. Then, with a subtle nod, he stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in, then. We'll see what can be done." As Emma crossed the threshold, warmth from the hearth greeted her, a stark contrast to the chill outside. The interior of the house was simple but well kept. Rough-hewn furniture, a sturdy table laden with a few simple dishes, and the faint scent of wood smoke mingled with something earthy and comforting. The rancher introduced himself as Jackson, his tone still reserved but not unkind. "You must be tired after your journey," he said, gesturing toward a worn chair near the fire. "Sit for a moment." Emma sank down gratefully, her limbs trembling from the long trek. Jackson busied himself with tending the fire, his movements deliberate and efficient. There was a quiet dignity in his presence, a steadiness that somehow eased the tension coiling within her. After a moment, Jackson turned back to her. "You said you need work. What can you do?" Emma hesitated, then met his gaze steadily. "I've done a little of everything. Chores, cooking, caring for animals. I'm willing to learn whatever you need." A flicker of something unreadable crossed Jackson's face before he nodded. "This ranch isn't easy work. But if you're willing to work hard, there's always something to be done. We could use an extra hand for the winter. Relief surged through Emma, mingling with a cautious hope. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. Jackson's eyes softened just a fraction. Don't call me sir. Just Jackson. We'll start tomorrow at first light. As the evening deepened, Emma sat by the fire, feeling the warmth seep into her chilled bones. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the sounds of distant cattle and the quiet pulse of the land. For the first time in weeks, a fragile sense of belonging took root. Though Jackson remained reserved, his demeanor held a subtle kindness that spoke louder than words. Emma knew the road ahead would be hard, long hours, demanding labor, and the challenge of earning her place in this new world. But here, at this door in the remote countryside, she had found a crack in the fortress of her past. And through that crack, a glimmer of possibility. As night wrapped the ranch in its dark embrace, Emma allowed herself a moment of rest. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of a new chapter, a chance to rebuild, to prove herself, and perhaps to find the kind of acceptance she had never known. The journey had been arduous, the miles stretched endlessly behind her. But now, as the firelight flickered across the rough-hewn walls, Emma's heart dared to hope that this place, and the man who had opened his door to a desperate stranger, might be the start of something lasting. Morning light filtered through narrow window panes, casting a pale glow over the simple kitchen where Emma stood, sleeves rolled up against the chill. The scent of strong coffee mingled with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread as she arranged plates on the worn wooden table. Jackson sat nearby, his broad frame leaning against the doorway, eyes watching her with an inscrutable expression that held just a touch of approval. The quiet hum of the ranch waking to a new day settled around them, a rhythm Emma was beginning to understand. Her first morning on the ranch had arrived quicker than she'd dared hope. The previous evening's exhaustion still clung to her muscles, but the promise of work and of belonging had ignited a determination that pushed fatigue aside. Jackson's offer to start at dawn had not been a mere gesture. It was an unspoken test, an invitation to prove herself in the unforgiving world he inhabited. After breakfast, Jackson led Emma outside to the sprawling pastures, where the cattle grazed beneath the wide sky. The ranch hands, a small group of men weathered by years of labor under sun and storm, eyed her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Emma met their gazes steadily, aware of the silent judgments that hung in the crisp morning air. She knew acceptance here would not come easily, but she was resolved to earn it through grit and perseverance. Jackson handed her a worn pair of gloves. "Start with the fence lines," he instructed. "We need to check for breaks before the storm season really sets in." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The task was straightforward in theory: walk the boundaries, mend any weak spots, but the vastness of the land and the sharp thorns lining the paths tested her endurance. She moved carefully, hands blistering from the rough wood, sweat mingling with dirt beneath her shawl. Yet with every repaired fence post, every tightened wire, a sense of accomplishment bloomed within her. Throughout the day, Jackson remained nearby, his presence a steady anchor in the sprawling wilderness. Occasionally, he offered brief instructions or corrections, his tone firm but fair. Emma noted how his eyes softened when she persisted through fatigue, how his stance relaxed when she met the challenges head-on. There was a quiet pride in those moments, though his words remained sparse. The ranch hands gradually shifted from wary observers to cautious allies. One, a grizzled man named Sam, approached during the midday meal, offering a nod of acknowledgement. "You're tougher than you look," he said gruffly, passing her a piece of smoked meat. Emma accepted it with a grateful smile, sensing the fragile threads of camaraderie beginning to weave between them. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with hues of amber and rose, Jackson and Emma found themselves repairing a corral gate side by side. The work was silent, save for the occasional clink of hammer on metal and the rustle of dry grass in the breeze. Emma stole a glance at Jackson, noting the lines etched deeply around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched in concentration. Beneath the stoic exterior, she sensed a reservoir of unspoken stories. "Ever worked a ranch before?" Jackson asked, breaking the quiet. Emma shook her head. "Not really. I've done chores here and there, but nothing like this." He considered her words, then nodded slowly. There's a lot to learn, but you've got the grit. That counts for something. His rare compliment stirred something warm inside her, a flicker of confidence that had long been dormant. Emma realized that Jackson's guarded demeanor was not a barrier but a shield, forged by years of solitude and hardship. Her presence, she hoped, might be the first crack in that armor. Over the next days, Emma's routine took shape. At dawn, she rose to stoke the fire and prepare breakfast. She fed the animals, cleaned the stables, tended to the garden, and mended fences. The work was relentless, each task demanding more strength and skill than the last. Yet with every chore completed, Emma felt herself growing stronger, more capable. Jackson watched quietly, offering guidance when necessary, but allowing her space to find her footing. Their interactions remained measured. Few words, steady glances, but beneath the surface, an unspoken bond began to form. They shared the hardships of the land, the early mornings and late nights, the satisfaction of a job well done. One evening, after the last light had faded and the ranch settled into a hush, Jackson surprised Emma by inviting her to join him on the porch. They sat side by side, the cool air filled with the scent of pine and wood smoke. "You're fitting in," he said quietly. "Not just with me, but the others too." Emma looked out over the darkening fields, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "It's been hard, but I want to belong, to be useful." Jackson nodded, his gaze lingering on her face. "That kind of will doesn't come easy. You've got something most people don't, strength and heart." Their words hung between them, fragile yet promising. For a man accustomed to solitude, Jackson's softened tone was a rare gift. For Emma, it was a beacon in the night, a sign that her efforts were seen and valued. As weeks passed, the ranch transformed from a daunting expanse into a place of purpose. Emma learned to read the land, the way the wind shifted, the signs of approaching weather, the rhythms of the animals. She discovered quiet moments of joy in the simple tasks, the steady thump of a hammer, the warmth of a well-tended fire, the laughter shared with the other hands during rare breaks. Jackson, too, seemed to change. His usual reserve gave way to subtle gestures, a shared meal, a glance that lingered a moment longer. He began to include Emma in decisions about the ranch, valuing her opinions and insights. The walls he had built around himself softened, brick by brick, by the steady presence of a young woman determined to carve out a new life. One afternoon, as they worked side by side repairing a broken cartwheel, Jackson paused and looked at Emma with an expression that was almost vulnerable. "You're not just here to fill a spot," he said. "You've become part of this place." Emma's breath caught, the weight of his words settling deep within her. The journey that had begun with desperation was now unfolding into something richer, a partnership born of shared toil and quiet understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson, Emma knew that she had found more than work. She had found acceptance, purpose, and the first glimmers of something that might one day be called home. The sky darkened with sudden urgency, the once gentle breeze twisting into frantic gusts that rattled the windows and whipped the tall grasses into restless waves. Emma stood near the barn, her hands steady despite the rising storm, eyes scanning the horizon as thick clouds gathered like a wall of shadow. The air carried the sharp scent of rain and the distant rumble of thunder, growing louder by the minute. Jackson appeared beside her, his expression taut with concern, the usual stoicism replaced by a rare urgency. "The storm's coming faster than expected," he said, voice low but firm. "We need to get the livestock secured before the worst hits." Emma nodded without hesitation, adrenaline sharpening her focus. The ranch was alive with movement. Men shouting orders, horses neighing in the stalls, cattle stampeding nervously in their pens. The wind tore at Emma's shawl as she moved swiftly, her hands working to close gates and reinforce fences. Every moment counted. The approaching tempest threatened not only the land but the very livelihood they'd fought so hard to protect. Jackson was a whirlwind of command and action, his presence both grounding and galvanizing. He barked instructions to the ranch hands, his voice cutting through the chaos like a beacon. Emma found herself side by side with him, their tasks intertwined as they raced to secure the weaker corrals and calm the animals. The storm's first heavy drops splattered against her skin, icy and relentless. As lightning split the sky overhead, a sudden panic erupted among a group of cattle near the northern fence. A section of the fence, weakened by weeks of neglect and the relentless wind, gave way with a sharp crack. Several animals surged toward the open gap, their fear palpable. Without a second thought, Emma sprang into action. She grabbed a coil of rope from a nearby post and sprinted toward the fleeing cattle, shouting to alert Jackson. He pivoted quickly, moving to intercept the others, but Emma's determination was unwavering. She looped the rope around the lead steer's horns, her arms straining against the animal's frantic pull. Inch by inch, she coaxed the creature back toward the safety of the pen. Jackson arrived just then, his hands steady as he helped secure the knot. Together, they herded the rest of the cattle back into the enclosure, their movements synchronized by necessity and trust. The storm roared around them, rain lashing their faces, mud sucking at their boots. But they worked with an urgency born of shared purpose. Once the animals were safe, Jackson clapped Emma on the shoulder, his eyes shining with a mixture of relief and admiration. "You've got guts," he said, voice rough but sincere. That took some quick thinking. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps, but a fierce pride burned within her. "I couldn't just stand by," she replied, wiping rain from her brow. "This place, it's worth fighting for." The storm battered the ranch through the night, fierce winds howling like a living thing and rain hammering the rooftops. Inside the house, Emma and Jackson sat by the hearth, the fire's glow flickering against the walls as they shared a rare moment of respite. The silence between them was thick, heavy with unspoken thoughts, until Jackson finally broke it. "Emma," he began, voice quieter than usual, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you." She turned to him, curiosity and caution mingling in her gaze. Jackson's eyes darkened with a shadow from the past. "I've lost people I cared about more than once. It's why I keep to myself mostly, why I'm slow to trust." Emma listened intently, the storm outside echoing the turmoil in his words. "But tonight, seeing you out there, risking yourself for this land and these animals, it changed something inside me. You're not like anyone I've known." Her heart stirred at the vulnerability in his confession, the cracks in the fortress he'd long maintained. She reached out, her hand resting lightly on his, a silent offer of understanding and connection. For the first time, Jackson allowed himself to lean into that fragile bond, the weight of loss softened by the promise of something new. As dawn broke, the storm finally relinquished its grip, leaving the ranch battered but intact. The morning air was fresh and cool, washed clean by the rain. Emma and Jackson moved through the fields together, assessing the damage and planning repairs. The experience had forged a deeper partnership between them, one built on trust, respect, and shared resilience. The ranch hands, too, sensed the shift. Their glances toward Emma held newfound respect, their earlier skepticism replaced by acknowledgement of her courage and capability. Jackson's demeanor toward her softened further, gestures less guarded, smiles more frequent. In the quiet moments between tasks, Emma and Jackson exchanged stories, fragments of their pasts that revealed the scars beneath their surfaces. Jackson spoke of the wife he had lost, the loneliness that had settled over the ranch like a shadow. Emma shared her own struggles, the hardships that had driven her from home and into the unknown. Through these exchanges, their connection deepened, a tapestry woven with threads of pain and hope. The storm had tested them, but it had also brought them closer, bridging the gap between two solitary souls seeking redemption. As they stood together overlooking the fields, the sun breaking through scattered clouds, Emma felt a sense of belonging she had never known. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a sanctuary where trust and courage could grow. Jackson's voice broke the silence. "We make a good team." Emma smiled, the weight of the night's trials fading into a quiet joy. "Yes, we do." The day stretched ahead, filled with promise and hard labor, but now tempered by a partnership forged in adversity. Together, they faced whatever challenges lay beyond the horizon, bound by the unspoken understanding that sometimes the fiercest storms bring the greatest hope. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth as Emma stood near the garden, her fingers brushing over the tender shoots of newly sprouted herbs. The storm had passed days ago, but its aftermath lingered, muddy paths to navigate, fences to mend, and fields to tend. Yet amidst the work, a different kind of tension weighed on her heart, one born from a letter she had received just the previous evening. Jackson approached silently, the soft crunch of his boots on the gravel announcing his presence. He paused beside her, his gaze searching hers beneath the brim of his worn hat. "You look troubled this morning," he observed, his voice gentle but concerned. Emma hesitated, clutching the folded paper in her hand. The letter was from her sister back in town, bearing news she had hoped to avoid. Their mother's health had taken a sudden turn for the worse, and with no one else to help, Emma was faced with a painful choice. Return home to care for her family or stay and build the life she was just beginning to find on the ranch. "I got word last night," she admitted softly. "Things are worse than I thought. I don't know how long I should stay." Jackson's expression darkened, the weight of her words settling heavily between them. He reached out, placing a steady hand over hers. "You need to do what's right for you, and for them." Emma looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch. "It's not easy. I came here to escape the past, to find something new. But family, I can't turn away." Jackson nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a mix of empathy and quiet resolve. "Whatever you decide, you have a place here. We'll figure it out together." Over the next days, the ranch buzzed with preparations for the coming winter. Emma found herself torn between the comfort she had begun to feel and the pull of obligations thousands of miles away. Mornings were spent tending to the animals, afternoons repairing fences, evenings in quiet conversation with Jackson as they shared simple meals by the fire. The ranch hands, too, sensed the turmoil beneath Emma's determined exterior. Sam, the grizzled elder among them, offered quiet words of encouragement. "No matter where you go, you leave a mark," he said one afternoon, handing her a freshly carved wooden spoon. "This here's to remind you, strength comes from where you've been and where you're headed." Emma accepted the gift with a heartfelt smile, the gesture knitting her more firmly into the fabric of the ranch community. Yet the decision loomed, a crossroads between the past she couldn't abandon and the future she dared to embrace. One evening, as twilight deepened, Jackson invited Emma to sit with him on the porch. The sky was a canvas of fading gold and emerging stars, the air tinged with the scent of pine and earth. "I've been thinking," Jackson began, his voice steady but vulnerable. "If you choose to stay, I want you to know this isn't just a job. It's a home, and I want you to be part of it, part of my life." Emma's breath caught, the sincerity in his words stirring emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel. "Jackson, I've never had this before, a place where I belong, people who care. It means more than I can say." He reached out, taking her hand in his, their fingers entwining naturally. "Whatever happens, I want you to have a future that feels right. Here, or wherever you need to be." The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and reflection. Emma wrote letters home, grappling with the uncertainty of how long her absence could be. Jackson stood by her side, helping with the ranch's daily demands while offering silent support for the storm of emotions within her. When the time came to make her choice, Emma found herself at the threshold of two worlds. The thought of leaving the ranch, and Jackson, was a bitter pill, yet the call of family was undeniable. With a heavy heart, she shared her decision with Jackson. "I need to go back," she said, voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "But I don't want this to be goodbye." Jackson's gaze held hers, unwavering. "Then it's not. You have a place here whenever you're ready to come back." Together, they mapped out a plan. Emma would return home to care for her mother, with the promise that the ranch would wait for her. Jackson pledged to keep the land thriving, to safeguard the life they had begun to build. As Emma packed her few belongings, the ranch community gathered to see her off. Their farewells were quiet but heartfelt, each gesture a testament to the bonds forged through shared labor and mutual respect. Sam clasped her hand firmly. "You're part of this family now. Don't forget that." Emma nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I won't." On the morning of her departure, Jackson surprised her by fixing the porch swing, smoothing the worn wood, and hanging a lantern to light the way. It was a small act, but one heavy with meaning, a promise of return, a beacon in the uncertainty. As the wagon rolled away, Emma looked back to see Jackson standing on the porch, the evening light framing his silhouette. Their eyes met, and without words, they shared a silent vow of patience, of hope, of a future yet to be written. The journey ahead was daunting, but Emma carried with her the strength of the ranch and the unexpected kindness of a man who had changed her world forever. Months passed beneath wide skies and shifting seasons, the rhythms of the ranch settling into a steady cadence that marked the passage of time. Emma had returned to her family, tending to her mother with the quiet strength that had carried her from desperation to hope. Yet the distance between her and Jackson felt like a shadow stretching across her days, a reminder of the life she had left behind and the promise yet to be fulfilled. Back at the ranch, Jackson kept the land alive in Emma's absence, his hands steady and sure as he worked the soil and cared for the animals. The ranch hands spoke often of Emma's return, their voices tinged with anticipation and warmth. Jackson himself moved with a renewed purpose, the memory of her presence a constant spark in the quiet expanse. Finally, the day came when Emma's heart could no longer bear the ache of separation. With her mother's health stable and the weight of her responsibilities eased, she set out once more toward the place that had become her sanctuary. The journey was familiar now, a path marked by hope and the promise of reunion. As she crested the ridge, the ranch unfolded before her like a living tapestry, fields bathed in golden light, cattle grazing lazily beneath the sun, and the sturdy house standing resolute against the horizon. At the doorway stood Jackson, his figure silhouetted by the afternoon glow, eyes searching the horizon until they met hers. Without hesitation, Emma quickened her pace, the miles melting away beneath her eager steps. When she reached the porch, Jackson stepped forward, a smile breaking through his usual reserve. "Emma," he said simply, the single word carrying the weight of everything unspoken. She smiled back, the warmth in her chest blooming into something fierce and undeniable. "I'm home." Together, they crossed the threshold, the house filling once again with the quiet sounds of life and the promise of shared days ahead. Plans were made for improvements to the ranch, new fences, expanded gardens, and repairs to the weathered barn. Each project a symbol of new beginnings, a testament to their joint commitment. The ranch hands welcomed Emma's return with open arms, their camaraderie deepening as they worked side by side. Laughter and stories flowed freely around evening fires, the sense of community weaving tightly around the two at the center. Jackson and Emma found themselves drawn together not just by duty, but by something more profound, a partnership forged through hardship and nurtured by trust. They shared quiet moments in the fading light, hands intertwined as they watched the sun dip below the hills, the future unfolding before them like the golden fields. One evening, as the stars emerged overhead, Jackson spoke softly, his voice carrying the weight of hope and certainty. "I want you here, Emma, not just on the ranch, but in my life." Her heart swelled with a joy she had never known, the journey from desperation to belonging culminating in this moment of truth. She reached for his hand, her touch steady and sure. "I want that too," she whispered. Together, they dreamed of a life built on shared labor and quiet affection, where the ranch would be more than a place. It would be a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the simple joy of being together. The land around them seemed to glow with possibility, the promise of a future written in the golden light of harvest, and the steady beat of hearts finally aligned. The sun had dipped low over the horizon, casting a warm amber glow across the fields as the ranch bustled with life and laughter. Tonight was special, a gathering to celebrate the harvest and the renewed spirit that had taken root in the land and in their hearts. Emma moved among the small crowd of ranch hands, neighbors, and friends, her cheeks flushed from the crisp evening air and the joy of reunion. The scent of freshly baked bread and roasting meats mingled with the smoky tang of the fire pits scattered around the yard. Jackson stood near the long wooden table, his broad shoulders relaxed, a rare grin breaking through his usual stoic expression. He caught Emma's eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of all they had endured and accomplished together. The community had grown around them, not just through shared labor, but through shared hope and kindness. It was a tapestry woven from countless small moments, a helping hand, a warm meal, a word of encouragement. As the stars began to pepper the sky, Emma found herself seated beside Jackson on the porch swing he had lovingly repaired months before. The lanterns hung from the eaves flickered softly, illuminating their faces with a gentle glow. The quiet between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that had blossomed over time. "I never imagined it would be like this," Emma said softly, her eyes tracing the constellations above. "A place where I belong, where I'm part of something bigger." Jackson's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with a certainty that steadied her. "Neither did I. But you changed that, for me and for this ranch." She squeezed his hand gently, the warmth spreading like a balm over old wounds. "You gave me a second chance." He smiled, the depth of his feelings reflected in the quiet strength of his gaze. "And you gave me hope." Around them, the sounds of celebration continued, the laughter of children chasing fireflies, the clinking of glasses, the soft notes of a fiddle played by one of the ranch hands. The community was alive, vibrant, and thriving, a testament to the power of kindness and resilience. Emma leaned her head against Jackson's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath the fabric of his shirt. The journey that had begun with desperation and uncertainty had led them here, to a place where love was nurtured through shared toil and quiet moments of connection. As the night deepened, plans were whispered for the future. New crops to plant, improvements to the barn, perhaps even a small market where they could share their harvest with nearby townsfolk. Each dream was a seed planted in fertile soil, growing alongside the bond between Emma and Jackson. The porch swing creaked softly as they rocked together, the world beyond the ranch fading into a comforting blur. In that moment, surrounded by the glow of lantern light and the warmth of shared dreams, they understood that this was only the beginning. The ranch was no longer just land and buildings. It was a home shaped by their hands and hearts, a sanctuary where love blossomed quietly amidst the everyday miracles of life. And as they sat beneath the endless sky, Emma and Jackson knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, rooted in trust, hope, and the simple joy of belonging.